All right. It's time for Buckeye Grove Instant Access.
It's about time.
With the latest breaking news, analysis, and much, much more from around the world of Ohio State. Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Let's move quickly and hand it off to our host, Kevin Noon.
It's time to start running!
Hey, welcome to the big show here on a Friday. We got some news to talk about. This is the first chance we've had to roll out the BIA podcast in terms of breaking news. You've heard us a couple times before on post-game, and you'll hear us after the Michigan State game on Saturday as well. But let's welcome in Alex Lightman, one of our great recruiting guys to the show. How you doing, Alex?
Hey, Kevin. I'm doing great. Glad to be here on this glorious Friday ahead of the darkness coming to Ohio Stadium.
Exactly. It's a blackout, so I'm sure Ohio State and Nike would appreciate you going out and spending your hard-earned money on yet another Ohio State jersey. But, we're talking about somebody who appears to be ready to wear an Ohio State jersey after he signs his letter of intent. Ohio State picking up a big commit today, a big-time defensive end out of Charlotte, North Carolina, Providence Day High School, Jacoby Cowan. Alex, why don't you talk a little bit about Ohio State's newest verbal commitment?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this was a good get for Ohio State for multiple reasons. First off, one of the biggest needs when you look at the class as it currently stood coming into Friday, it was on the defensive line. Right now they have Darian Henry, they have Ty Hamilton. Both of those guys technically are categorized as defensive ends, but from what I'm hearing, both of those guys are more than likely to move inside. Ohio State has been recruiting Jacoby Cowan as a defensive end, a strong side end. He's a big kid. He's up. I think right now he said he's at 265, he told me the other day. So he's got really good size, obviously could grow into the type of guy who does move inside. But right now Ohio State's recruiting him to stay on the outside. They think he can continue to get bigger, get in kind of better shape, add good weight to his frame while also keeping his speed and athleticism on the outside. Again, he's a big kid. He can help you set the edge against the run. He's really active with his hands. He's aggressive in attacking the ball carrier. And, he makes plays, whether it's going after the quarterback and getting the sack, whether it's, as I said, kind of being active with his hands at the line of scrimmage and batting down balls or tipping them up and being able to, I saw earlier in the year he had an interception. He really could do a wide variety of things. And there's a reason why he had offers at different points in the process from Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, some of the really big programs in America. And so going down to North Carolina to get a guy at a position of need and a guy who's a top 150 player on Rivals and can do the things he does, I think it's just a huge win for Ohio State.
Yeah, in the Rivals.com database, we're showing them with 30-plus offers, and sometimes our database can be a little bit low on what it is, so definitely a national type of kid. And truth of the matter is Ohio State was recruiting 2 defensive linemen out of the same school, and I think that if we would rewind this back to the summer, everybody thought Ohio State had a better shot at Kedrick Bingley-Jones instead, who is opting to stay close to home, and maybe that Jacoby Cowan was going to be a little bit more of a wild card.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you said, Bingley-Jones, at the end of the day, for him, it was probably about staying home. I know both of these guys, Ohio State was kind of like hot and cold throughout the process. First off, obviously, when there was a little bit of confusion at the hard cap of 25 early in the process for Ohio State, that certainly factored into it. I know with Cowan specifically, there were certain things, I'm not going to go into them too deep, but certain things that Ohio State just needed to check out on their end, make sure everything was good to go to give them the green light to commit. So this one was kind of, I don't want to call it strung along a little bit, but they definitely took their time. They weren't pressing for Cowan to kind of come into the class. Bingley-Jones, I think, is a guy they would have accepted at the time when he committed, but as we said, he kind of wanted to stay home. But Cowan was a guy who I think expressed interest in Ohio State throughout the process. It's very telling that his only official visit has been to Ohio State. Obviously, North Carolina isn't too far from home, and he made an unofficial visit earlier this year there. He was on some other visits, but the only official visit he made throughout the process was to Ohio State. I think that's very telling as far as where his interest lies. And so when Ohio State, kind of checked all the boxes, did all their research, evaluated him and others a little bit further, and they decided that this was the guy they really wanted to go and get. I think it was kind of, I don't want to call it a no-brainer. They obviously had to fight off some other schools, but it was, that they knew they were going to have a great chance to land him as the interest was really high on Cowan's part, even though he kind of kept things a little bit closer to the vest and had been telling people that all 12 schools in his top 12 were being considered along the way.
Yeah, Ohio State now sitting at 23 commitments in the class, and this breaks quite a drought. Ohio State hadn't had a verbal commitment since the end of July with Court Williams when the Buckeyes went on a tremendous run. In July, they landed players like Joe Royer, Mitchell Melton, Cam Martinez, Josh Fryer, Mookie Cooper, Lathan Ransom, and I'm just talking in the class of 2020. They've had some kids in 2021 come through, but 2020, I mean, they were getting up high in the numbers, regardless of this hard cap that they misinterpreted at 25 or whatnot. So, now they're really able to go out and kind of big game hunt.
Yeah, as you said, like they pretty much have most of their class closed out. I think there's a number of players that they're still looking at, and you could probably count the positional needs and the number of players that will get into the class on one hand. They're probably looking at trying to take a second quarterback. They'd like to get at least one running back, if not two. They're probably done on the offensive line. They might take another defensive lineman, though. They're done at linebacker. And I think in the secondary, they're looking at a cornerback because I think they feel like they have safety taken care of, especially with the new system where you're really only playing one high safety throughout the course of a game. So you look at it, cornerback, a defensive lineman, two running backs, and a quarterback. That's 5 players right there. They may not fill all those needs. They might take a guy who's best available and maybe doesn't fall into one of those positions. But that's how I see Ohio State kind of attacking things moving forward until the signing period in December and then after that in February. And I think they're going to be very selective in who they go after for those positions.
And we have a name to talk about here in a second, but let's pay some bills really quick. Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. Welcome back. I'm still joined here with Alex Lightman here of BuckeyeGrove.com. And before the break, we said that there was a name that really could fit into some of their plans. Ryan Watts, a cornerback out of Little Elm, Texas, was a longtime Oklahoma committed in April of 2019. Just decommitted earlier this week. Things are looking good for Ohio State there, right?
You'd have to think so. It's funny. Mark and I were talking Wednesday afternoon about a few players who were visiting this weekend, a couple other players in the mix, and I had mentioned to him that I was getting this feeling just from the vibe of things that Watts was close to flipping to Ohio State. And then a few hours later, Mark, tip of the cap to him, he did a great job reporting, working with our Oklahoma site in reporting that Watts had decommitted. We both had contacted him after that, found out that, I think this is really key for Ohio State, found out that he was supposed to visit Penn State later this month before their game against Michigan. And that visit no longer will be happening. Ryan told me that his grandmother hasn't been doing too good, so they decided to call off that visit. Obviously, that's a completely legitimate excuse, but the fact that that's not being rescheduled to a later date or anything is pretty telling as to where things stand. He decommits from Oklahoma. He's more than likely, I would call it 99%, not going back to the Sooners. No visit for Penn State means he's not going there. People have mentioned Texas A&M. He did not tell me about any sort of visit or any sort of interest or anything planned for Texas A&M. And from everything I heard from Ryan, as well as people on the Ohio State side of things, they are firmly in the driver's seat. I wouldn't be surprised if this happens sooner or later. I know there's talks about potentially getting him up again for an unofficial visit, either for the Wisconsin game or the Penn State game in November. If that happens, I think you're absolutely on commit watch. Even if it doesn't happen, I could see this happening, again, what's that timetable? By the end of November, maybe, and I would guess it's going to be sooner than that when Ryan Watts becomes a Buckeye, which would be an excellent get for Ohio State and would fill that need at the cornerback position.
And as we're sitting here on Friday, right on the heels of the big commitment of Jacoby Cowan, defensive end to the Buckeyes, Ohio State's getting ready to put together quite a recruiting weekend. A lot of their 2020 commits are in, but there's still going to be some names there and a lot of guys for 2021. I know we can't go through it item by item, but what are some of the biggest storylines that you see going into this recruiting weekend?
Yeah, I think looking back at those position needs, where's Ohio State trying to fill the holes? The first place I talked about is adding a second quarterback, and they're going to be hosting Rancho Cucamonga quarterback C.J. Stroud, a 2020 player, killed it at the Elite 11. He really blew up there, started to add a ton of offers. That's when he started to also get Ohio State interest and build a relationship with Ryan Day and Mike Yurcich. And, CJ doesn't have an offer from Ohio State yet. The relationship has been really strong. The communication has been really strong. I think this weekend it's an interview of sorts to make sure he is the guy that they want to add to Jack Miller in this class. And if all goes well and according to plan, I don't see a way in which C.J. Stroud leaves Columbus, especially coming on his own dime, without an offer from the Buckeyes. And I think from there, it's a really good chance he could end up an Ohio State commit in the not too distant future. I think Ohio State has to fight off Oregon. They have to fight off Baylor. But I think C.J. Stroud, again, coming on his own dime all the way from California is definitely something you have to put stock into and you have to take into account when you talk about how likely he is to become a Buckeye. And then outside of Stroud, I would say the other two visits that I'm really looking forward to in the 2020 class and seeing how they go. Running back Trey Bradford out of Texas making an official visit, and then defensive end Tyler Barron out of Knoxville, Tennessee, coming up making his official visit. First off, Bradford, Ohio State needs a running back in the class really bad. They offered Mayan Williams. I think they would love to get him and Bradford if they can. I don't want to call it a first come first serve situation, but we could be heading in that direction when it comes to like the pool of 3, 4, 5 running backs that they're seriously looking at right now. And from everything I hear, Ohio State has the leg up on Wisconsin for Bradford. LSU is now in the mix. They're definitely going to be a player, but I think Ohio State is the team to beat if both sides want this to happen. And then Tyler Barron, Kevin, I know you and I had talked about him in the past. Me and Mark talked about him the other day. He's a guy who everyone had on lock to Tennessee, but with the season they're having and the uncertainty of Jeremy Pruitt in Knoxville, I think the door has definitely cracked open. And I was told by a source late on Wednesday night that if Tennessee is not the lock that everyone thinks they are, that Ohio State would definitely be the team to beat with Kentucky right behind them. So timing is really perfect on that one. So those are really the 3 2020 guys I'm looking forward to seeing the most. And then just to name a 2021 guy or two guys, a couple kids from the state up north, running back Donovan Edwards and defensive tackle Damon Payne, two guys who many have felt Ohio State has a lead for or who have led for at different points in the recruiting process. And those are two guys Ohio State really wants. Michigan really wants them. So that kind of takes that recruiting to the next level. And so, there's a lot of great storylines this weekend. We'll be all over it on Buckeye Grove, but those are, 5 players right there that I'll really have my eye on.
I'm going to ask you an impossible question, but one that I'm sure fans who are listening along want to know. From today to the end of next weekend, the end of the open week, what's the over-under on potential commits between 2020 and 2021 that the Buckeyes could potentially get, especially putting in the factor that Ohio State doesn't have a lot of spots left in 2020, but everybody always is asking on the Horseshoe Lounge, is this kid on commit watch? Is this kid on commit watch? What are your thoughts? I mean, could we see something coming in the next 8 days?
Oh, man. That's always tough because a lot of these events that Ohio State has, these big recruiting weekends, they don't always lead to immediate commitments, whether it's Friday Night Lights pass or the barbecue they have this summer. But these weekends, like this one coming up, plant the seed and kind of lay the groundwork for Ohio State to get the commitment eventually from a lot of the kids who visit. And I see this weekend being very similar. So normally I would say 0.5. If you get one, that's great. Because I think they're going to get a lot of these, at least I don't want to say a lot, but a few of these kids later on in the process. But with Ryan Watts factored in, maybe C.J. Stroud, maybe Trey Bradford, maybe a 2021 kid that we're not thinking of that just, they kind of just completely hit it off this weekend. I'll say it's going to be 1.5 as the over-under. I think I'm going to predict 1. They get one of the guys that we just mentioned. And, if they get anything more than that, I think that would be an outstanding week for the Ohio State staff.
And there you have it. That is always great insight by Alex Lightman. He's on the board every day with us, but be sure to catch his A-Deck feature on Wednesdays, one of the best things out there in all of Buckeye Nation. And keep it locked in here at BuckeyeGrove.com. We have you covered for everything that's going on. Without further ado, though, I am going to wrap this one up so we can get this posted. My name is Kevin Noon. I'm your host here at Buckeye Grove on the BIA podcast, and thanks for being a part of everything.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcasts Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.